Have you ever imagined that a creature smaller than your fingernail could bring an entire nation to its knees? A storm not born from clouds, but from billions of wings. What would happen if these tiny beings all rose up at once? Could humanity stand against nature's invisible army? This isn't science fiction. These disasters truly happened in human history. Insect catastrophe, when nature strikes back. On this planet, every time you take a breath, millions of tiny wings beat in unison. In the depths of the Amazon, beneath the soil of Africa, across the plains of Asia, and even in your own backyard, they are everywhere. These seemingly insignificant creatures are, in fact, the most numerous force ever to exist in the history of life. Scientists estimate that more than 10 million trillion insects are alive on Earth, sharing every patch of soil, every drop of water, and every breath of air. Every square meter you step on may conceal thousands of tiny beings, silently digging, pollinating, decomposing, and renewing life itself. And humanity? Barely 8 billion, a number that seems vast, yet means nothing compared to that tidal wave of life. In sheer numbers, each of us is just a speck of dust in the storm of microscopic existence that rules this planet. We depend on them far more than we realize. 75% of all human food exists thanks to insect pollination. Without them, there would be no flowers, no fruits, no harvests. But like every perfect machine of nature, that balance is extremely fragile. Just one misplaced rain, a few degrees of ocean warming, or a new land cleared by human hands can be enough to make the system collapse. And when that happens, the very force that once sustained the planet will turn back and consume it. That's when the catastrophe begins. In 2019, while the world was fixated on a newly emerging virus in Asia, on the other side of the planet, another kind of storm was forming. Not a storm of water, but a biological storm. People once believed that desert locusts were solitary creatures, scattered across dry, scorching lands. Weak, isolated, and far from being a real threat. But in 2018, the Arabian Sea changed. Two powerful storms, Cyclone Mekunu and Cyclone Lubin, struck the Arabian Peninsula in succession. They brought the heaviest rainfall in over 20 years, turning barren desert into a vast, humid landscape that lasted for months. For the locusts, it was paradise. Each female lays hundreds of eggs, and within just 2 weeks, the entire region swarms with larvae. When the eggs hatch all at once, billions of young locusts crowd across the ground, devouring every patch of green in sight. Then, all at once, they grow wings and take to the sky together. That was the beginning of the catastrophe. From the coast of Yemen, the locust swarms crossed the Red Sea, sweeping into Ethiopia, Kenya, then onto Pakistan and India. Wherever they went, devastation followed. Fields of rice, corn, and sorghum were stripped bare within hours. People in Kenya said the sun disappeared for 6 straight hours. the sky completely darkened by wings. The Kenyan government called it a nightmare with wings. A single 1 square kilometer swarm of locusts can consume enough food to feed 35,000 people in a single day. And when the largest swarm ever recorded stretched over 2,400 square kilometers, every attempt at control became utterly meaningless. When the first satellite images were released, people finally grasped the true scale of the disaster. Enormous moving bands, stretching for hundreds of kilometers, so dense they blotted out the land beneath them. It was no longer a swarm of insects. It was a single biological entity, moving as if it had a mind of its own. Aircraft were deployed across East Africa, spraying thousands of liters of pesticide every day. Radars, drones, and even satellites were used to track the locusts' movements. But it was all futile. They had no territory, no borders. They rode the wind, doubled their numbers with each generation, and spread across 23 countries. And for 3 years, the battle between humans and insects raged on. It wasn't until 2022, when the climate dried and the monsoon winds shifted, that the swarms finally began to fade. But what they left behind wasn't just empty fields, and hunger, it was a warning. This story isn't just about an insect. It's a reminder that whenever humanity disturbs nature, the consequences will always return. But the locusts were only the beginning. In Africa, there exists a creature no larger than a grain of rice, whose single bite can send a human into a deep sleep from which they may never wake. Amid the dense forests of Central Africa, where sunlight rarely touches the ground, lives a creature no larger than a grain of rice. It may seem harmless, yet for more than a century, it has paralyzed an entire continent. This is the Tsetse fly, the carrier of an invisible killer. It looks like nothing special, a small fly, barely 1 centimeter long, with transparent wings, a gray-brown body, and movements slower than a common housefly. When it lands, its wings fold neatly together, like a blade, the only sign that reveals you're looking at a tsetse fly. Tsetse flies feed on blood to survive. Both males and females need it. The blood of any warm-blooded creature: buffalo, cattle, antelope. In the wild, their existence seems perfectly normal. They drink blood, the animals recover, and the natural cycle remains in balance. But then, humans began pushing deeper into the forests. They cut down trees, cleared land for farms, and brought livestock into areas where these flies had long lived. The boundary between nature and humanity began to fade. The tsetse fly found a new source of blood, richer, slower, and completely defenseless. What they didn't know was that every bite was no longer an act of survival. It was the seed of a catastrophe. In 1896, the first cases were recorded in Uganda and the Belgian Congo. Locals called it the sleeping sickness, a name that sounds harmless, yet it is one of the most terrifying diseases nature has ever created. When a tsetse fly bites, it injects Trypanosoma brucei into the bloodstream. This parasite can change its protein coat to deceive the immune system, making it impossible for the body to recognize the invader. Once it reaches the brain, the victim begins to lose the boundary between wakefulness and sleep, slowly drifting into a state of eternal dream. At first, it was just a few people, then entire villages, then whole regions. From 1896 to 1906, the sleeping sickness epidemic spread across Uganda, the Congo, and Angola. In just a decade, it claimed over 300,000 lives. No vaccine, no cure. But the tsetse fly didn't just kill people, it also devastated African agriculture. Millions of buffalo, cattle, and horses died from nagana, the animal form of sleeping sickness. The most fertile lands along the Congo, Zambezi, and Nile rivers were abandoned. Even the European empires at the time were forced to abandon countless plantations because no one dared to go near them. After the catastrophe of the early 20th century, humanity began to strike back. In the 1950s, massive campaigns were launched to eradicate the tsetse fly on an unprecedented scale. Aircraft sprayed chemicals, millions of bait traps were set along the rivers, and tons of forest soil were burned to destroy the fly's breeding grounds. By the mid-1970s, many regions of Africa declared themselves tsetse-free. Farms returned, cattle grazed once more, and people believed that sleeping sickness was nothing more than a distant memory. But they forgot one simple truth. Nature never disappears. It only steps back. This story reminds us that sometimes the most dangerous creatures aren't the great predators, but those so small we hardly notice them. These two disasters are just the tip of the iceberg. In the world of insects, there are beings smaller, faster, and 100 times more deadly. What do you think about these two catastrophes? If you know of an even more terrifying biological disaster, share it in the comments below. In the frozen wilderness, strength is not always measured by size or by speed. Some strike from the shadows, others rely on sheer solitary power, and some transform unity into a deadly weapon. Step into the path of the northern warrior, the gray wolf. At first glance, you might think, the gray wolf looks just like a large dog. But step closer, and you'll see the difference immediately. The gray wolf ranges from 1.2 to 2 meters in length, weighing between 30 and 80 kilograms depending on its habitat. In the Arctic, they grow larger with thick coats to withstand the cold, while on the steppe, wolves are leaner and built for speed. What's fascinating is that, though they belong to the same species, nature has forged them into many different versions. With a bite force of 400 psi, a wolf's jaws can snap the bones of a moose. The number may sound dry, but imagine this. It's like a steel clamp locking onto your arm and never letting go. This bite force is not remarkable compared to a crocodile or a lion. But remember, wolves do not win with a single strike. Their true weapon is the power of the pack. So when they coordinate as a pack, what kind of terrifying power will be created? When the gray wolf returned to Yellowstone after nearly 7 decades of absence, they did not come alone. They arrived like a disciplined army. Here, a typical pack numbers between 8 and 12 wolves, just enough to form an efficient hunting machine. But there have been records of giant packs reaching 20, even 30 individuals, a force powerful enough to impose control over an entire valley. In every wolf pack, there is always an alpha, the leader who guides the way, not only strong, but also wise. Beneath the alpha is the beta, the right hand that enforces discipline throughout the pack. And finally, the omega, the weaker individuals, often submissive, yet still essential in easing tension within the group. It's truly remarkable. Even wild predators maintain a social order that resembles a military unit. That very order is the foundation of the wolves' true strength, the power of collective hunting. When hunger forces them to act, each member plays its role within a unified strategy. Here, their prey is the bison herd, giants weighing up to a ton, with the power to bring down any challenger. The alpha leads the way, the beta enforces discipline, while the others move in harmony to expand the encirclement. Interestingly, they don't rush in right away. Instead, I see them standing at a distance, silently observing. The wolves never waste energy on the strongest ones. They patiently look for weakness, an aged animal or a vulnerable young. The wolves work to drive a weak one away from the herd's protection. Once the target is isolated, the pack pursues with relentless patience. The chase may last for hours, as repeated strikes at the hind legs slowly wear the bison down. The chase can last for hours, as relentless strikes at the hind legs gradually wear the bison down. And when the prey is weakened, the entire pack surges forward together, turning the strength of unity into the final blow. This victory feeds the entire pack, but it doesn't end there. The bison's carcass soon becomes the spark for new conflicts. In such a harsh world, a grand feast is also an open invitation to danger. The scent of blood and fresh meat spreads far, drawing in other predators like polar bears. With their keen sense of smell, they can detect a carcass from many miles away. When a bear appears, the atmosphere changes at once. from a lavish feast into a hidden battlefield. The bear's physical power far surpasses that of the wolves. Just one swing of its claws is enough to bring down a grown adult. The pack is left with only two choices: either yield the meat or risk defying the giant to keep part of it. When a bear appears, the atmosphere changes at once, from a lavish feast into a hidden battlefield. The bear's physical power far surpasses that of the wolves. Just one swing of its claws is enough to bring down a grown adult. The pack is left with only two choices: either yield the meat or risk defying the giant to keep part of it. Not only are they robbed of their prey by other predators, but sometimes gray wolves must also face their own kind. When winter drags on and food grows scarce, tension rises and brutal battles erupt between wolf packs. Each pack is forced to fight, not only to hold on to every fragment of territory, but also to seize the few remaining prey. In that brutal spiral, the losers lose more than a meal. They lose their very home. Whether in the icy forests of the gray wolf or on the harsh grasslands, the law of survival is the same. Territory and food are always the cause of relentless battles. Do you see that similarity? If you agree, leave a comment below.